Today we're taking a look at a watch that is very, very strange. It's a watch that I've had my eye on for a little while, and there's a bunch of different reasons why I've never actually purchased one. But one came up on eBay for an excellent price, and I could not resist. I have a little bit of a problem. This is a Waltham. It's a modern Waltham. This is actually a recreation of the brand Waltham. However, what they've done here is very, very strange. It's a large watch. It's made out of grade 5 titanium. It has a high-end Swiss movement. It's actually made in Switzerland. It's owned by an American. However, the watches are made in Switzerland. Very strange inspiration behind these watches. However, I did buy one and I want to show you what I got. So let's flip the camera and take a look at a Waltham Aeronaval CDI. So this is a very strange watch. I mentioned in the intro, this is a Waltham. Waltham have a very long history of watchmaking. Started here in the United States in Massachusetts. However, they were sold to the Swiss and then I believe the Japanese. And now it is again an American brand. So an American businessman actually bought the name and now owns the name Waltham. He started making watches a few years ago, and I'm not sure if they're still in business. And what they did was, they didn't take inspiration from their vintage watches. They took inspiration from their cockpit clocks that were used during World War II, specifically the Aeronaval. And this is the CDI version of that. This is the central date indicator version. So they actually made a clock with a central date indicator, and this is inspired by that clock. This is also a GMT. It's using an ETA-based movement. However, it has a Dupuis movement or module on top, and that allows it to be, number one, a true GMT or a traveler's GMT. So it is the actual hour hand, the local hour hand that moves when you are setting the GMT. And then you also have a button right here that is for the date. These two buttons that control the GMT. So you can go forward with this button and back with this button. We'll get back to the functionality in just a second. So this does look a lot like that clock, like those original cockpit clocks. It's the shape that is mostly taking the inspiration here of the case of this watch. This is in grade 5 titanium. It has a screwed-in crown, a screwed-in case pack, 300 meters of water resistance. You get a flat sapphire crystal with AR coating. You have a thick ceramic bezel on here, which is fixed. It has a 24-hour scale on it. Below that, just under the sapphire crystal, you have a chapter ring. Below that, you have another chapter ring. So there's basically two chapter rings on this watch. There are applied indices to the bottom chapter ring. Those indices are loomed with a gray colored loom. And then on the top chapter ring, you have a triangle there at the 12 o'clock. That second hand actually is at the level or in between those two chapter rings. And then it is bent up so that it is actually above the top chapter ring. It looks very, very strange. You have 5 hands on here. So you have a second hand. That second hand is in white or gray color. It's not completely loomed, or I don't think it's loomed at all, which is kind of disappointing. And then you have a very hard to see GMT hand that is also skeletonized and skinnier than all the rest of the hands. And then you have a small hand that indicates the date. That's that CDI portion, the central date indicator. And like I said, there was an actual clock that this takes direct inspiration from that wasn't a GMT, but did have that central date indicator. So this is a large watch. It's in grade 5 titanium. It still weighs a lot. So even though it's in grade 5 titanium, it does feel like a heavy watch. It has an integrated bracelet. So this is a rubber strap. It gets a very big buckle on here that is signed Waltham. You can see scratches on here. This is a used watch. This is a watch that I actually purchased off of eBay for $275. That is actually a very good price for this watch, considering the original retail price on this watch was $8,250. That is kind of mind-blowing when you think of it. Now, the materials are here. The movement is probably in the neighborhood of what that price should be. Probably not at the same time, but Considering it's actually a pretty complicated GMT, I think the $8,200 is definitely overpriced, but the $275 is definitely way underpriced on the secondary market. This came with box and papers, by the way, and it's in excellent condition except for the buckle. The buckle is the only place that this has scratches on it, and that's because that is in grade 2 titanium, while the case is actually in grade 5 titanium. And then, like I mentioned, this is solid ceramic. It is a fixed bezel, so it is not a ratcheting bezel. Now, this does have some pretty cool functionality. However, when I purchased it, I did not know there were some issues with the functionality, and unfortunately there are. But you can advance the hour hand just by pressing this button, and that will actually control that date. However, you can see that date jumped a few days when I actually pressed that GMT hand. So there's a problem with that. However, you could definitely change the the date just by pressing this button. Now, it doesn't work every single time, so you just have to keep on pressing, and it will move forward, as you could see. So that's how you move the date. Now, I believe with movements like this, if you are not extremely careful of when you're actually changing the GMT or changing the date, you could actually break the movement. And I think that's what happened here, because this button is basically non-functioning. It works sometimes, most of the time it does not work. But the GMT hand does work pretty well, as you can see right there. So that's the local hour hand that's jumping. Works really, really well. And the date works. So once you have it set, it works perfectly fine. So everything technically works. It's the controls that aren't working perfectly right now. Other than that, I think it's a really cool watch, especially for $275. So I really can't get mad at the price, because it is $275. Even though it's not fully functional, I still feel like I got a really good deal. It's a 47 millimeter watch though. So this is a very large watch. It's measuring at 48 millimeters at the case, and at the bezel, it's almost 42 and a half millimeters. It's around 16 plus millimeters thick. So this is not a small wearing watch. So 16.8 millimeters. You have a very large crown, which is around 8 millimeters, so 7.6 millimeters. And the lug to lug is around 60 millimeters because of that rubber strap. It does not fold down at all. And you can see it wears sort of like a cuff, is the way that I would describe this watch on wrist. And I'll show it to you on my wrist in just a second. So on wrist today, I have another eBay purchase. And as with all eBay purchases, at least in my experience, there is always some pitfalls. This was not exactly as described either, just like that Waltham. This is an Angelus minute repeater. So it's a private label. It's under a different name, but it was made by Angelus, and it has a really cool movement inside. It's hand wound. So this is a mechanical minute repeater. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It always chimes and it gets the hours right, but sometimes it doesn't get the minutes right. It could be just because it is from the 1970s. It's a watch that actually killed the brand Angelus, but we'll get back to that in a later video when I do a review on this. But let's listen to the minute repeater, see if it actually repeats correctly, and then I will show you the Waltham on my 7.5 inch wrist. Well, almost. There's a little bit of a half gong on the end there, so it missed the second half of the gong, but that could be because I didn't press the button correctly. Sometimes that happens. If you don't press it fully, it won't gong out completely. But it actually sounds very loud compared to other minute repeaters that I have heard. I've actually owned a minute repeater in the past with a very similar movement and at a base, so pretty cool, and it sounds very good. So this was almost correct this time. Well, after having that Angelus on my wrist and then putting this on my wrist, this almost looks comical, but in person, I promise you, it looks smaller. It does wear like a cuff, like I mentioned, because you have this very thick rubber strap, and then you have this huge buckle on here. It wears like a cuff watch. That's what it kind of looks like too. It definitely takes inspiration from their old clocks, but I think that they were sort of aiming at the AP Royal Oak offshore. That's what this kind of reminds me of more than anything else, especially in size, because those watches are very, very large. I think that that's what they were trying to go for, an integrated bracelet, big watch, and you know, here you are. I think it looks good. It's a crazy watch, but for $275, I just couldn't pass it up. It's not even the tax on what the original MSRP was. Well, there's a lume. It's not incredible. It does fade pretty quickly, and you could see that GMT hand. That GMT hand is just right next to the 12 o'clock index, that large 12. You have that 12, 9, 3, and 6. Those are all loomed. Then you have the indices. Those are all loomed. That triangle is loomed. All the hands are loomed except for the seconds hand, which is kind of disappointing. I believe they even loomed the date. However, it is so faint, it is very, very hard to see. They loomed the date hand, but again, they used all of this colored loom, this darkened loom, so none of it is really bright except for the minutes hand, which is, you know, not very useful. Anyway, there you go. Tell me what you guys think down in the comments below. Am I crazy for buying this watch? It's obviously very, very large. I have no idea if I will ever wear it. $275, it was just so much, I just couldn't pass it up. I mean, you could hear the anguish in my voice. I could not pass it up. I think I do have a problem. Is it a watch that I'll ever wear? I have no idea. It is giant, and I've been moving away from large, very large watches like this, but at the same time, I think it's really cool. I wish I could just make this into like a desk clock or something, but I don't know. That doesn't really make all that much sense. Tell me what you guys think down in the comments below. I'd like to hear from you guys. Please also don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell icon. It's super helpful for the channel and I very much appreciate it. And thank you for logging on. I'll catch you guys in the next video.